Welcome to episode 104 of Warriors Unmasked. Today I sit down with author, advocate, Olympic torchbearer, husband, father, and cystic fibrosis warrior, Mr. Andy Lipman. Andy will take a deep dive into his journey from being diagnosed at birth with cystic fibrosis after losing his sister 3 years prior to the same disease, to knowing he was different than other kids, to winning the most improved athlete in 4th grade, and using that as fuel in the rest of his life to make the world a better place, one day at a time. This episode is bound to take you from sadness, hurt, compassion, and empathy to feeling hopeful, encouraged, aware, and completely empowered. So sit back, relax, and enjoy another amazing episode of Warriors Unmasked as I sit down with Mr. Andy Lipman.
You're listening to Warriors Unmasked, where you'll hear powerful stories about courage, perseverance, and overcoming mental illness from athletes both professional and amateur, coaches, military personnel, first responders, and even the people next door. Welcome mental health advocates and your host, former NCAA first team All-American and professional goaltender, professional speaker, and life coach, Chuck Thus. And former National Hockey League goaltender, best-selling author, professional speaker, and suicide survivor, Clint Malarchuk.
This episode of Warriors Unmasked has been brought to you by the American Hat Company. American Hat Company has been making the finest cowboy hats for the past 106 years. We are proud to be Americans, and we are proud to wear American hats. For more information, check them out on the web at americanhat.net. This week's episode of Warriors Unmasked has been brought to you by the Shift Group. Shift Group is turning athletes into sales professionals. Is your company looking to hire driven, competitive former athletes? Are you a former college or pro hockey player or former collegiate athlete in any sport and trying to figure out what's next? Consider a meaningful career in technology sales and let the Shift Group guide you every step of the way. Reach out to them directly at www.shiftgroup.io or email them directly at jr@shiftgroup.io to get started today. Are you a business owner looking to spice up your brand? Look no further than Pete Thus at Talbot Marketing. Pete can help you with all your promotional product and corporate apparel needs. From pens to tumblers and polos to jackets, Talbot Marketing is your one-stop shop for anything you need branded with your logo. Reach out to Pete today at 519-494-7629. Welcome author, advocate, Olympic torchbearer, husband and father, and cystic fibrosis warrior, Mr. Andy Lipman. Andy, welcome to Warriors Unmasked. It's a true pleasure to have you on the show today, my friend.
Thanks, Chuck. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to this.
I am as well, and I think that you, the listener, you're in for a treat today, because the more I've learned about Andy and the journey that you've been on, you are an amazing human doing unbelievably outstanding work. And I think I'm going to encourage you, the listener, just to settle in for about the next 45 minutes or so, because I think Andy's going to share with you a journey that I don't want to say isn't normal, but for lack of better terms, maybe you've defied all the odds, all the numbers, all the stats. You seem to be the guy that's rising above this. And I just love what it says everywhere that I read about Andy Lipman. Andy Lipman has cystic fibrosis, but cystic fibrosis will never have him.
I appreciate that. That's kind of been my mantra for a long time. It's pretty powerful stuff. If you let something control you, no matter what it is, whether it's a disease or anything else you're dealing with, then you're not going to be successful. You really, really have to say that I control everything in my life and make the best of every single day.
And it seems like Andy Lipman is doing that. And it's very inspirational, because I think there's probably a lot of people, not only those who have been diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, but those that have been put up against anything like this. It's probably hard at times. And is it hard some days for Andy Lipman to keep going?
Oh, sure. And I want people to understand that I'm not Mr. Happy-go-lucky. Everything is great. You know, I go through a lot of tough days. It doesn't even have to be CF related. It can be anything. And, but I know deep down, you know, tomorrow is another day, and not every day is going to be the greatest. But you know what? If you're alive at the end of the day, then you won, you succeeded. So that's kind of how I approach things. But yeah, I deal with their depression, anxiety, all those sorts of things. I see therapists. I don't want people to think, oh, this can't be real. Yeah, I go through a lot of stuff. So everybody goes through something. We just kind of deal with it the best way we can. It doesn't have to be perfect, but as long as it works for you, that's all that matters.
And I love that outlook, Andy, because I think that's real life stuff, what you just shared. Because I think a lot of people have the misconception that when they hear, like Andy's a torchbearer, he's a warrior, he's doing this, he's doing that, it just means that, okay, he has this one little thing that he battles, but he's got that under control too. So life is pretty cool for Andy Lipman. But I love how you just got real and you opened up your heart and you just got real with everybody to share that, you know what? Yeah, life can be tough. But that doesn't mean that just because life can knock you down, it doesn't mean that you don't get back up.
Exactly. It's kind of the social media age. People see people put something out on social media. They're like, man, their life is wonderful and mine is terrible. But you know what? Social media, it probably means very, very little as far as when someone says, hey, everything is great. Sometimes it's a cover. Sometimes it's something to make you feel better. It's therapeutic, whatever. But just know that you can't compare yourself to everyone else. All you can do is the best that you're doing. And that's really all you should shoot for. Just keep doing the best that you can.
Absolutely. And you're right, because I think you and I are probably around the same age, and we didn't grow up with social media. We didn't have this comparison, like you said, of people showing that their life was all lattes and bonbons and all these fabulous things. And nobody was struggling. Nobody was doing, having a tough time with anything. But that seems to be a little bit of the way around social media. And I think it's creating a lot of things that people are up against in life today because they think that people are really living like that.
It's so true, especially for teenagers. I mean, I feel bad for those who are younger and they see it all over the place. All these, notes. Hey, we went to Blake's house. We did this, we did that. We went to a party. And then you're thinking, hey, did I get invited? I didn't get invited. We didn't go through that when I was growing up. When I was growing up, I just, we went outside, stayed about 12 hours, knew what time to get home for dinner, rode our bikes home, and that was it. But the world is a totally different place. And I have two young children, and they're both teenagers now. So that might be the toughest ailment that I deal with, not CF, but two teenagers. But, they have a totally different situation than I did. I can't even imagine how tough it is to live in these days.
Again, we have another similarity. I have two teenagers as well. And just watching what they grow up in and with, it can be tough. I mean, it can be stressful with all the comparisons and being on social media. And yeah, it's a lot for these young people to deal with. And I know us as a family, we try to navigate it as a group and do our best, and try to figure it out for them so they don't have to walk that journey alone. But it sure is a much different world than you and I grew up.
It is not an easy world. I mean, you heard from our parents used to do I used to run 10 feet in the snow or whatever, 100 feet in the snow to school, and didn't have a car, had to take the bus, all this, everything was so different. But I think we're the first generation that we know less about computers than our kids. So we are really learning on the fly how to deal with this stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Andy, you were diagnosed with cystic fibrosis as just a baby, I believe. Is that correct in saying so?
That's true.
So what does that look like? Take us on a little bit of a journey, what that looks like at being diagnosed at such a young age. Was there therapies? Was there a lot of doctor's appointments? What did life look like at a very young age for Andy?
Sure. So when I was born, the reason they diagnosed me so soon, twofold. One was because I had meconium ileus, which meant I had a blockage in my intestines. And number two, 3 years before I was born, I had a sister that was born with cystic fibrosis. My parents weren't even aware that they were carriers. And my sister only lived 16 days, unfortunately. So I was 3 years later. As soon as they saw meconium ileus, they knew that I had CF. But back then, there really wasn't much. There were enzymes that you took for your digestion. So there's someone unfamiliar with cystic fibrosis. We have really bad digestion. Most of us have a really bad digestive systems. And so we have to take these enzymes. I probably take about 30 a day now. And what they do is they make it so you can digest fats better because otherwise you can't do it. Also, what we had was something called postural drainage. And postural drainage is for my lungs. So people with CF normally have really bad lung function. And so I would have lots of mucus stuck in my chest and my lungs. And my parents would do postural drainage, is where they would pat my sides, my front, my back to loosen the mucus from my lungs. And then I would spit it out. And before they would do the postural drainage, I would do an aerosol nebulizer with a medication to kind of protect my lungs in some ways. But it was just a medication that I would do. And then I would cough everything up once we started doing my postural drainage. And that was pretty much it. There really wasn't a lot out there at the time. There were no CFTR modulators, which is the big deal in CF now, where it kind of repairs the cell a little bit, where it makes it easier for you not to cough, that kind of stuff. But back then, that's really all it was. And the life expectancy was really low. When I was born, the life expectancy was, I believe it was 16. And as I got older, when I started realizing what I had, the life expectancy when I was about 9 was about 25 years. And so growing up, the first 8 or so years, I didn't really know what I had, but I knew I was different. I knew none of my other friends had to do postural drainage. I knew none of them carried a bottle of pills around. But so it was scary, and I almost didn't want to know, because I know my mom would kind of cover up TV shows that would have advertisements about CF, or that if there was a TV movie on about CF, she wouldn't let me watch it. So it was tough, and I knew appointments were really difficult. I would cough a lot, and my doctors would always look concerned. And I noticed there were no adults with cystic fibrosis, so that was really scary. Could I live long enough to even be an adult? So I went through that stage for many years. I was kind of dealing with hidden depression and anxiety because I had a disease that I knew was going to take my life pretty soon.
So you said that you made the comment that you knew that you were different from the other kids. Were sports, all of those types of things that many children go up, was that part of Andy Lipman's youth as well, or was that something that you weren't able to participate in?
Yeah. So when I first read that article about people with cystic fibrosis not living to the age of 25, that was around 9 years old. It was in an encyclopedia. My dad didn't want me to get upset or frustrated or scared. So he took me out to a baseball tryout and kind of got me involved in sports. And that was a real help, because whenever I was on the baseball field or on the tennis court or the basketball court, I didn't think about CF for those, whatever, 60, 90 minutes that I was out there. It was really helpful. And I felt like part of the team. And so I really appreciate my dad for getting me involved in sports, but for the most part, I really appreciate sports for what they've done for me. They really just changed the way I look at things. I mean, growing up, other kids, back then, you didn't have a filter when you were a kid. They would ask me, are you going to die? Are you contagious? Why are you so skinny? Why are you always sick? I would get those questions. I didn't know how to answer. I would ask my mom and dad, and they didn't even know how to answer them for me. But it was on the court or on the field where I just didn't have to answer those questions. I could just be me. And sports has become one of my biggest loves ever since then. I'm a diehard college football fan, especially Georgia Bulldogs. I went to the University of Georgia, and then a diehard Atlanta Braves, all Atlanta sports teams, which until the Braves, that was not a good thing. But I've really loved sports, and I've gotten my children involved, and they really enjoy sports as well.
I love to hear that, Andy, and I love to hear that your mom and dad tried to, quote unquote, normalize life for you as much as possible. Because I think, and even though I don't suffer from CF, I would have to think that that would be a major key to the mental well-being of you as a young man, or anybody that's dealing with CF, that would play a major role in their overall well-being.
It really did, and it really has. It gave me something to compete with. My mom, I remember we went to a doctor's appointment one time, and the doctor advised that I go to a camp with lots of CF patients, which at the time there was nothing about cross-contamination bacteria where people with CF can give it to each other. It was just, hey, let him learn what it's like to have cystic fibrosis. And I remember my mom saying to the doctor, he doesn't need to know what it's like to have cystic fibrosis. He has cystic fibrosis. He doesn't need to compare himself to people with cystic fibrosis. He needs to compare himself to his friends, to his peers. And why can't he play sports with them? Why can't he do other things with them? And it really made me think, I can compete with them. And then there was a level to me that also was like, I can beat them. It wasn't just about competing. I got very competitive. And I think CF was a big part of that, that I didn't want to just be as good as somebody else. I wanted to be better. And not to say I was better than anybody else, but it was this inside me that really pushed me to work hard at my craft, at tennis, at baseball, at basketball, whatever it was. I just wanted, I didn't want CF to be my excuse for everything. I used to say when I was growing up for a long time, CF stood for crutch found, because I would just see it as a crutch. It wasn't what I was good at. And then one day I was running laps and I would always finish in last, always finish in last, always finish in last. And my uncle was like, yeah, he was a runner. And he's like, I think Andy can run. I'm gonna work on training him. So I was training with my uncle, and all of a sudden I wasn't finishing last anymore. I was starting to finish in the middle of the pack. And eventually I was finishing in the top 3 or 4. And I'll never forget. Most people will not remember that they won an award called Most Improved Athlete of the 4th grade. But for me, that was the knowledge that I could do this. And that was an award that still means a lot to me. I've lost it. I don't know where it is, but it's something that will always mean a lot to me, that I can compete with anybody. It's just a matter of up here being able to compete.
I absolutely love that, Andy. I love your approach, even as a young man in the 3rd and 4th grade, because that has obviously served you very well moving forward in all the different things that we're going to talk to. And you, the listener, you're going to learn some of the amazing work that Andy's doing. And he's taking that mentality right there and applied it throughout his life. It's fantastic. So, Andy, you go into high school, you graduate from high school. What is life like at that point? Is it still pretty normal, quote unquote, normal for you? Or how are things as far as CF, the way your body is responding to it? Share that with us if you would.
Yeah, I would say in high school, it was relatively normal. I still had to do my therapy. The cool thing was when I was 16, most people, their independence, they get a car, they start driving. But for me, it was the first vest that I received. And a vest it's like a therapy vest, physiotherapy. And instead of my parents doing the postural drainage where they would hit me on my backsides and front, I would put on this vest and it would vibrate and it would loosen the mucus from my lungs. And it was more than that. I knew I could go off to college and grow up and do things instead of just sitting at home and being with my parents the whole time. Not that I didn't love my parents, but I wanted to get out. I saw my friends talking about what colleges they were applying to, where they wanted to go, talking about all the fun stuff I wasn't sure I was going to get to do. And when I got the vest, I knew I could go off to college and maybe do something with my life. So that was really important. So I felt relatively normal and I felt like things were getting better. I did notice I was still very skinny. That's part of malnutrition with cystic fibrosis. My arms were you could take your entire hand and engulf my bicep. That's how skinny I was. I didn't lift weights, anything like that. I just played tennis. That was my sport. Played high school tennis, and I was okay. But then, I headed off to college, and if you want me to talk about that, I can. That's where a lot of things changed when I went to college.
Yeah, I would love to hear that, because I think, to this point, life seems like it's pretty normal for Andy Lipman. Yeah.
It was. I'd say it's as normal as it was going to get. When I went off to college, the first day is when it really hit me. Is I had to carry my big vest machine with me up the dorm into the room. And here's the thing: it's not just people say vest. They're like, "Oh, is it just like a regular vest?" No, it was this machine that weighed about 70 to 80 pounds. It's this little square, looked like a cage in a square, and you would step on the pump to make it really loud, and it would vibrate your chest. So it was really hard because I carried the thing up there. People wondered what it was. Was it a computer? What was it? Brought it up to my room. And when I would do it at night, it was so loud. Back then I was doing it once a day. Nowadays I do it twice a day, 3 times if I'm sick. But I was doing it once a day. It was just really loud. People were like, I'm trying to do my homework. They would knock on the wall, like, quiet down. What's going on in there? It was really hard. It was difficult to take it. I kept trying to do my vest as much as I could. I took my pills. I tried to remember to take them all the time. But as a freshman college student, I missed some therapy sessions. I missed my medication at times. It affected me. I wasn't in my best health, but I wasn't in my worst health either. So it really wasn't getting to me. But by my sophomore year of college, I was living in my fraternity house. I was really coughing a lot more. a girl walked in seeing me do my therapy, a girl I kind of liked at the time. And she was like, "Oh, I'm sorry," closed the back door. And I felt so alienated at that point, so different. I'm like, this disease is killing me, literally. And I stopped doing my therapy. I stopped taking my meds. I got really sick. It was just really bad. And then there was a basketball going on. There was a basketball game. I had stopped going to class. I was on academic probation. Everything was falling apart. I play in this basketball game. I'm coughing up all the time. And this guy knocks me to the ground, just sets a pick, knocks me to the ground. I come so skinny. I weighed about 100 pounds and I was like 5'7", 5'8". And he picked me up again, took his hand, was able to engulf my entire bicep, picked me up. And I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, "You joining any weightlifting contests anytime soon?" And he was just kidding around. Everybody kids. You're a fraternity brother. That's what we did. But it was at that moment, I was just really frustrated, angry. And I don't want to be this guy who people laugh at, make fun of. Especially I didn't want this person. I was sick of it. And I thought about it for a minute. I am 19 years old. What have I done with my life? I've done nothing. I keep looking at an encyclopedia article that said I was going to live to 25. Well, I'm 19. I've done very little to help myself and I'm still here. What if I put in an effort and worked my butt off? What could I do? So I'll never forget. I walked back into my fraternity house after we finished the game. I don't remember if we won or lost. I'm sure we lost because I was so sick. I could barely get up anymore. I got back in my room and I made a list of goals that I wanted to do. And the big one that I always remember was that I wanted to join an advanced weightlifting class. Technically, I wanted to join just a weightlifting class, but there wasn't one at UGA at the time. There was an advanced one. So I took the advanced class. I'll never forget the first day I walked in and I saw these huge people walking up towards me, and it was the women's gymnastics team. They were much bigger than me, but I joined the class. On the first day, they gave us a waiver and said, "Is there anything that could prevent you from doing this?" And I wanted so badly to write cystic fibrosis. But I remember being a kid and, going to PE and finishing in last and slowly finishing higher and higher. And CF wasn't going to affect me then. It wasn't going to affect me now. So I wrote nothing. I finished the class. I went from lifting about maybe 90 to 100 pounds to lifting about 180, 170, 180 pounds in like 3 months, whatever it was. I did the class every day, even worked out on the weekends when I wasn't supposed to because I wanted to get stronger. And I went back on that basketball court and same guy knocked him down. I'll just never forget that feeling of I didn't help him up because I'm like, you can get your own self up. Because I wanted to advance. I wanted to get better. I wanted to get stronger. It was around that time I started running, getting into training. I wasn't a very good runner. I would cough all the time. I had to stop at times, but I never stopped and completely. I kept going. I would stop, cough it up, go back to running, go back to running, go back to running. I ended up going from academic probation to having probably close to a B average in college, which I was on Dean's List almost every quarter for the rest of my career to get myself there. And things were starting to look up. I graduated a year late because of all the things I had wasted at college. But around the age of 25, actually right on my 25th birthday, is when I decided I want to do something more than just beat CF for myself. I want to do things for others. And I thought of that encyclopedia article right when I woke up on my 25th birthday. And I began writing my own book, which you can see in the background here, called Alive at 25. And that was my way of saying to other people with CF, hey, just because people told you couldn't do something doesn't mean you can't. And so I started becoming an author at that point. I started writing, and that was the same age that I found out that the sister that was born before me, I had no idea that she died from cystic fibrosis. I thought she had died from sudden infant death syndrome, but my mom told me, and that's when we started a charity event called Wish for Wendy, and that has raised over $4.5 million over the last 20 some odd years for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation and other CF related charities. And that's kind of how my life changed. I started running. You mentioned Torchbearer. I ran with the torch in 2001. It was an awesome, awesome experience. And I began becoming an avid runner. And this year will mark the 27th consecutive year I've run a 10-kilometer race called the Peachtree Road Race, which is the biggest 10K in the world that is done every year in Atlanta. And so that's kind of my story. And that's what college did for me. That's what I did for me.
That's amazing, Andy. And I'm even going to say, it probably goes back to winning that 4th grade award, right? As the most improved athlete, that that moment right there, you started to get a belief in yourself that you could do anything and that nothing was going to stop you.
Yeah, I stopped using CF. CF less and less became my crutch. It became more about, if you want to do something, odds are you could probably do it, but you may have to work a little harder. You may have to work a little differently, but you could do it.
And so I want to go back to those days, and maybe the days even right around when you got knocked down on the basketball court. What was your mental health like at that point? Because you, like me, in those times, people weren't talking about your mental health or weren't talking about how you were feeling or anything like that. It was more of a suck it up, push through it, figure it out, all of that kind of mentality. But as you look back at that young Andy Lipman, what was your mental health situation like at that point?
That was terrible. I mean, I had tremendous anxiety, tremendous depression. There were times I went through several months when I was living in my fraternity house where I would not open the door. I would not go eat during the day. I barely would go to the bathroom. I waited till nobody was around. I went through this stage where I just couldn't, I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want people to see me. I was embarrassed with how I looked, how skinny I'd become, how sick I'd become. My lung function had gone down around 30% at that time. I had gone to a doctor's appointment. My doctor was at UNC in Chapel Hill, and I went there, and he was asking me, "What are you doing? What's happening?" And I would always lie, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm still doing my treatments every day and my meds every day." But I was falling apart. I wouldn't answer my phone. I was just sick both mentally and physically, and I was ready to lose my life. I was set. I mean, I started to think about ways I could kill myself, and that's the truth. This is me as a sophomore in college. I just didn't want to live anymore. I didn't feel like I cared about anything or anyone, and that's how low I got. So I will definitely admit that I wish I had a therapist back then. I wish I had the strength to find a therapist back then. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah. And it wasn't something, I mean, in your defense, it wasn't something that a lot of people did, right? We didn't talk about it. Was it that moment, Andy, on the basketball court? Was that a defining moment in your life?
That was my therapy. I always say that was the first session of therapy I ever went to. I've been to many since, but that was the first one. It was just a moment where I was so angry, and I wasn't angry at the guy who knocked me down or picked me up or any of that stuff. I was angry at myself. I'm like, what are you doing? I was just so frustrated. I'll never forget when I walked in my room, I even ripped off my shirt, and not like Hulk Hogan or something like that. I ripped off my shirt because I was so angry. I didn't know who to take it out on. I've got to fix something. I got to stop. I got to go back to class. I got to start doing workouts. I got to run. I got to talk to people. I can't keep doing this. It's really what happened.
That's amazing. I love how you have that defined moment that you look back where your life really changed. And I have one similar that happened in 2008 that the listeners have heard many, many times. But when you look back at that, it's almost just like you got to a cross point in your life and you could go left or go right. You chose to go right, and it set you up to make the world a better place in so many ways with all the work that you're doing today.
I appreciate that. I mean, I guess at the time it was just about making myself liked by myself. I just remember looking in a mirror and not being pleased with who I saw. And I wanted to be better. I wanted to be different. I wanted to make the most of my opportunity. I mean, there's an old saying, life is not a dress rehearsal. You get one chance at this baby. You might as well make the most of it. And I wasn't making the most of it the first 20 some odd years of my life. And I decided if CF is going to take me, it's going to take me at my best, not my worst. And so that's really when that attitude started forming, changing the way I was living. And the fact was, I wasn't living at the time. I was breathing and everything, but that's really not living. Living is living, going out and making a difference in the world, meeting people, taking adventures, going on adventures, whatever, just making the most of your life is so important rather than just being who you are. Go out and do what you want to do. And so that's when I really started to do some of those things.
That's a perfect segue, Andy, into what I want you to share, because you've written 5 books and you started with Alive at 25. So please take us through and share with the listeners the books that you've written, the kind of the purpose and the message behind them. And please don't be shy. Let us know where you can find them as well.
Oh, absolutely. So my first book, Alive at 25, and we called it How I'm Beating Cystic Fibrosis, came out around 2001, 2002, somewhere around then. And that was just my story about what I've basically told all of you today, where I was and where I am now and what it took for me to get there. There's a lot more of the story if you read the book. But that was the first book I wrote. And it's funny, when I told my dad I was writing a book, he's like, I didn't even know you could read a book. Yeah, I never really read much in high school or college. I just kind of, I use Cliff Notes. I'm not ashamed to admit that, or I read the front page, the back page, and the summary and see if I can make it work. Kids, by the way, that does not work. I did not do well with that. But those were some of the kind of things I would do. But when I started writing my first book, I really just enjoyed it. It was therapeutic to do it. And so I wrote the first book. We got it published. Then I did my second book, which was called, well, the first one was called Alive at 25. The second was called The Drive at 35, which you can kind of see below me in orange right there. And The Drive at 35 was talking about how I met my wife, Andrea, who's my best friend, my biggest supporter, and I'm her biggest supporter. She has done so much. She's beaten thyroid cancer. She has multiple sclerosis and is doing great. And she's the strongest person in this family by far. So I talk about how I met my wife and how we had to go, because of me and my cystic fibrosis, I wasn't able to have children. So we had to go through something called in vitro fertilization, or IVF, where it's not the fun way to have kids. But we went through that and took it several times, but we finally had my daughter, Avery, who is now 17 years old, and my son, Ethan, who is now 14 years old. And so in the second book, that's what we talk about, finding the person of your dreams, getting married, having kids, but also doing it with cystic fibrosis. And I talk in the first book of how tough it is to date with cystic fibrosis and how I met Andrea and all that. But it's hard because you worry that people will see you as the disease and not see you as you. And Andrea was amazing at seeing who I was, and it really worked out. And then the third book was a fictional story for teenagers called, it had to do with a baseball player playing with cystic fibrosis, trying to make it to the big leagues. And it's called A Superhero Needs No Cape. And it's all about, everybody wants to be a superhero, but you really don't need a cape for it. You just need to have that attitude, the strength to just go out and make the most of life. And then the last book before this last one is called The CF Warrior Project. And it's where I interviewed 65 people with cystic fibrosis and told their stories and how they live with CF. And the book was basically to show people that there are all sorts of different ways to live with the disease, but the main goal is to live with the disease and to give it everything you got and to keep fighting. And then the most recent book, I do have a copy, called The CF Warrior Project, Volume 2. And it's celebrating the cystic fibrosis community. And instead of just interviewing people with CF, we interviewed about half of the people with CF and the other half that happen to advocate for those with cystic fibrosis. So we have several celebrities in there. You can find it, by the way, on Amazon. You can find all these books, but the CF Warrior Project and the CF Warrior Project Volume 2 are on Amazon. But the latest book, you'll see we interviewed celebrities like Justin Baldoni. He's the director of 5 Feet Apart, the big high-grossing movie about cystic fibrosis. We also interviewed legendary comedian Lewis Black, baseball Hall of Famer Chipper Jones, all these people who have done a lot for cystic fibrosis. We have scientists, doctors, those who found the gene in 1989. We have 2 different doctors who helped find the gene that led to all these CFTR modulators that are helping people live longer. And it's just really cool stories about people living with cystic fibrosis or fighting for those with cystic fibrosis. And it's a big top seller now on Amazon, and we're really excited about it. And all the profits are going to CF related charities so that we can make a difference in the community.
That is absolutely incredible, Andy, the work that you're doing and the support that you're gathering. It's absolutely heartwarming to hear that people are rallying around the CF community to support those that are going through this and looking for the solution on how everyone can live a better life, live a longer life, extend that life expectancy past 37 years, which you have eclipsed, and we'll just say a few years ago, which is amazing. And it looks like you're not stopping anytime soon.
Well, I'm going to keep pushing it. Someone once wrote, I plan on dying with cystic fibrosis, not from cystic fibrosis. And I love that. I love that quote. And so that's kind of my attitude too. Whatever happens, happens, but I'm going to give it my best shot. And I'm always going to try to, there's a thing people are like, well, you don't want to be defined by cystic fibrosis. I'm like, that's okay. I mean, I don't feel like I need to be defined by it in my own head, but if someone else defines me by cystic fibrosis and it helps them, and if I can encourage somebody else, that's great. I'm glad to do it. I really do want to help. I remember being that kid who was so scared because I didn't know anybody older with cystic fibrosis that were living with the disease. I didn't know how long I was going to live. All I did was see flyers and videos that said people with CF don't live very long or have negative doctor's appointments. And so my goal was just to make a difference. And I wrote this last book in memory of my mom, who we lost in 2020 from lymphoma. My mom was my biggest supporter, my biggest advocate. My dad obviously was too, but there's something about a CF mom, as we say. My mom would do my therapy every day, my postural drainage, and she would put the nebulizer on my nose when I was half asleep in the morning. She would take my pills with her in case I forgot them. She was always there for me. And there's a funny story, a couple of stories about my mom. And one of them is I was in the doctor's office. I had a really bad appointment and she saw me looking at this poster, and the poster was of a guy that looked like Hulk Hogan. It was for a weight gain drink, and my mom saw me looking at it and I was kind of really sad, but she saw my eyes like kind of open up a little bit when I was looking at it, like how strong that guy was. I wish I was that strong. And my mom said to me, he has cystic fibrosis, right? I was like, no. And she goes, yeah. And my mom told the biggest white lie that day. He did not have cystic fibrosis, but I was so excited that maybe I could look like that. And several years later, we were doing our charity softball tournament to fund the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. And this guy came up with his son, the son had cystic fibrosis, and he saw me and I'd gotten a lot stronger at that point. And he looked at me, he looked at his son, he goes, you can look like Mr. Lipman here. You can be strong just like him. And it made me think of that poster and thinking, that was a lie. This is for real. He can live to be like that and probably even bigger. So that was really helpful from my mom. And she was just always really such an inspiring person. And the other quick story I'll tell you was when I was a little boy, she did a charity event, and she'd found out a guy by the name of Isaac Hayes, who was a big musician back then. Some of you might know him as Chef from South Park. He did The Voice. And my mom had heard that he was driving around Atlanta, around a certain area. And she was doing this big charity event. She's like, well, we need things. I'm going to go find him. And they were like, you're crazy. You're not going to find him. She'd only lived in Atlanta maybe 7 or 8 years. My mom starts driving around this road that she heard he was on. She sees him running with this big entourage, like bodyguards, whatever it was. My mom drives past him, stops the car, gets out, and says, Mr. Hayes, my name is Eva Lipman. He tells her whole story about me and about her daughter, Wendy, and everything that happened. And he's like, well, if I can help, I'll definitely try. I got to go, but thank you so much. And she's like, well, I appreciate it. So a few weeks later, they're doing the event. And that day they come up to my mom and they're like, there's these guys outside. They want to see you. And my mom didn't know what it was. So they came in, they're like, Mrs. Lipman, we're here for Mr. Hayes. He wanted to give you all this autograph stuff for your event. And so he gave her all this stuff. They raised a record-breaking amount of money. And my mom told me the story years later when I was much older, when I'd started my own charity event for cystic fibrosis. And she said, you know what I learned? The worst you can hear is no. And she said, you never know until you try. Go out and do it, ask. And today I still do that. I'll go up to a celebrity or whoever and ask them. I'll write to somebody and say, please, we're really trying to do this. We're trying to make a difference in the CF community. And my mom started all that for me. She really did. She helped me understand that everything through life, it can't hurt to try. You never know. The worst they can say is no. And we tell that story in the book as well. But my mom was just an amazing human being. She was born right after the Holocaust. My my grandparents barely survived, and my mom was born in a displaced persons camp in Germany. And they were taken to Ellis Island. They went to the US and eventually they were in Jacksonville, Florida. They didn't speak any English. My mom was about 3 years old at the time. And here it is. My mom survived all these years and made a difference in the world. And she actually, when she was in college, her philanthropy for her sorority was cystic fibrosis. And she didn't even know she would have kids with CF at the time. And so she was helping with the event. And what did she find out? That one day, two of her kids had cystic fibrosis. So it's kind of crazy the world that my mom lived in. She had a lot of inspiring things happen to her, but she made the most of her life. And so that's why I dedicated the book to her, because she's such an inspirational person that if you knew my mom, you loved her. The only way you didn't love her is if you never met her. I mean, that's who she was. So
That's amazing. And everybody that's listening today knows that I have a soft spot in my heart for moms. As you're talking about your mom, I think about mine, who I lost just 9 months ago. So thank you for sharing those mom stories. I think every mom wears a Superman cape in one way or another. And the fact that you are dedicated, or you have dedicated your book to your mom, man, that hits home. So thank you for sharing that. What does life look like today for Andy Lipman? I know you mentioned, that you still work through some mental health issues. You still go see a therapist, which I absolutely love that you shared that. So thank you for doing that. That's what we are about here at Warriors Unmasked, is normalizing that conversation. So what does life look like for Andy today?
sure. Well, a lot of people ask, do you have a 9 to 5 job? I used to. So I worked for almost 2 decades. My dad and I worked in the same company and it was eventually sold. So I got out of the for-profit world and got into the nonprofit world, where I started my own foundation along with my family called the Wish for Wendy Foundation. We raise funds for those fighting cystic fibrosis. I'm a big motivational speaker. I go out and make speeches. I've been as far away as Ireland, California, state of Washington, Washington, D.C. I mean, I've gone a lot of places to make speeches and tell people what it's like to live with CF and how we can make a difference in the world. I write a lot, as you know, the 5 books, but I write a blog occasionally. And most importantly, I'm a dad and a husband. So my wife, Andrea, we've been married almost 21 years. And like I said, I have 2 teenagers. My daughter, Avery, amazing. She's great. I don't want to say too much about her because she's a teenager and I don't want to cross that line. Same thing with my 14-year-old son, Ethan. But they're both great kids and they both they see the world kind of the way I hope they would. Nobody ever, when you're a teenager, really sees everything. Like, I want to do so many good things, but they are very charitable for their age and they're making a difference in the world in their own way. So I'm just really proud of, actually my wife too, she's extremely charitable and I'm really proud of them. And, I'm just trying to be the best son I can to my dad. And I have a younger sister, Emily. Emily was adopted because, the first 2 kids having cystic fibrosis and there being a 1 in 4 chance. The way CF works is both parents have to have the gene for CF, and then there's a 1 in 4 chance that child will have cystic fibrosis. So after 2 attempts and having 2 kids with CF, my parents just wanted to adopt and make sure that the 3rd kid did not have CF. So my younger sister, Emily, who is married and is expecting my first niece. I'm very excited for that. But, so the world is pretty good. I deal with issues with my CF and my mental health. I go to a therapist quite often. I'm not ashamed to admit that. I take anti-anxiety meds. It helps me deal, not just with CF, just dealing with life sometimes. I wasn't supposed to live beyond the age of 25 years. So here, being 50 this year, I'll be 50 in September. It's a lot to take. It wasn't something I expected. And while I'm grateful for it, it's something I just never saw coming. So I manage it by going to therapy and taking the meds that I need to. But it's been great. I'm really happy. I go through tough times like anyone else, but for the most part, I can see the positive in life. But I like I said at the beginning, I want people to know it's not every day that I see the positive. I go through plenty of days where there's a lot of things I'm dealing with or we're dealing with. It's tough. I have a very strong family that's there for me and I'm very appreciative. As I mentioned, my wife is the strongest person I know, and in our household, she knocks me down to the floor. She's so much stronger than I am. I'm just so proud to be her husband. So this should be a lot of brownie points, by the way.
Yes, you'll have to make sure she listens. Is there something that you'd like to share that Andy Lipman does to help him stay with a smile on his face? You've had a smile on your face the entire time we've been talking today, and that's so admirable. But is there something that's kind of Andy's key to making sure that life has more ups than downs?
I guess this may seem simple, but I just stopped comparing myself to others. I just started comparing myself to what I want to be, and just living the life I want. Again, it goes back to social media. Sometimes you'll look at someone and be like, man, those are the kind of things I wanted to do or I wanted to be. But I guess I'm satisfied as far as what I have, but I'm not satisfied as far as what I still want to do. I'm grateful, I guess I should say, is what I have, but I still have goals in life. I haven't stopped having goals. There's always something I want to accomplish. I may not accomplish it, but I'll definitely give it the fighter's chance. That's the thing I'll do. I think what's really helped me throughout life is, especially the last 20 or so years, is the athletics. We were talking about sports, but for me, I work out every single day. I run every single day. I push myself. I listen to motivational music. I make TikTok videos, which is kind of fun. It's crazy. We have, I think, like 35,000 viewers. But it's something I do just to make a little light of cystic fibrosis, but also to explain what cystic fibrosis is. It's called the CF Warrior Project if you're looking on TikTok, but I like to have a little bit of fun. I tell a lot of jokes. I try to have a sense of humor. Like if you have a chronic disease, having a sense of humor is almost like having a cure. If you can make light of the toughest days, you can make it through this world. You can survive, because if you can't laugh at yourself, man, you're in for it. It's tough. And I learned that a long time ago, going to doctor's appointments and getting bad news. It was hard to smile. It was hard to laugh. It was hard not to think about the future and be so scared. But I don't put a lot of effort into thinking about the future. Sometimes I should more than I do, but I'm really appreciative of the present. And I'm glad to be here. Being 50 in September, never thought it was going to come, but blessed, very blessed.
That's fantastic. And Andy, before we let you go, I want to remind our listeners to go to warriorsunmasked.com, where you can listen to this episode with Andy and all the previous ones and all the ones coming up. And while you're there, drop us a note. We want to hear from you. Send us an email. Let us know how you like the show. If you have a guest suggestion, whatever it might be, what's on your heart, what's on your mind, we want to hear from you. And you can also listen to us on Apple Podcasts and any of the other major podcast platforms. And when you're on Apple, hit that plus sign in the top right corner so you never miss an episode of Warriors Unmasked. Because like this one today with you, Andy, it's been absolutely heartwarming. It's been inspirational. It's been informative. And I want to ask you one more thing before I allow you to leave. I want you to dig into that big heart of yours. And if you're sitting across from somebody today, because there is somebody listening today that you've struck a chord with, and I'm guessing it's more than one person, that maybe whether they have CF or not, but they're dealing with some things that life has dealt them, much like you have throughout your entire life. What would you tell that person today if you could speak to them one-on-one?
Well, I kind of would say what I write in every book that I sign is live your dreams and love your life. And I always find that so important. Live all your dreams, make the most of every day, but love your life. See yourself as the hero you want to follow. Look in the mirror every day and say, I'm happy with who I am. And if you're not, do what it takes to get there, but be happy. Don't compare yourself to anyone else. Don't compare yourself to anyone else's expectations for you. Compare yourself to who you are and what you want to be, and never stop doing that, because that'll get you through the toughest days. And like I said, sense of humor, so important. Laugh even when it's tough to laugh. Like sometimes I know there's that elephant in the room. You're in a room and everybody knows you're going through something difficult, but make a joke, laugh it off. That'll do more good than you'll ever believe. It really does.
Andy Lipman, you're an amazing human. And thank you for all the amazing work that you're doing. Keep fighting, keep going. because I sense there's a lot of things for you to accomplish in this world and a lot of giving back that you need to do yet before you exit and go to the other side, but not because of cystic fibrosis, simply with cystic fibrosis.
Thank you, Chuck. Thanks for having me. And I really enjoy this show, and I look forward to many more episodes to view. And thank you to your audience for listening in.
Thank you, my friend.
Thanks for listening to Warriors Unmasked. For more resources and to connect with Clint and Chuck, go to warriorsunmasked.com. If you feel this podcast has impacted you, we ask that you subscribe and share with a friend you feel may want to hear this message.